the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and today I am joined by Bonnie Beadle, and Bonnie is the owner of the Katherine Parr Society. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hello, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about Katherine Parr with you today because for the longest time, she was my favorite of Henry VIII's queens, and obviously because she was Thomas Seymour's wife, I rank her all the way up there. It was only recently that she's been dethroned by Catherine of Aragon, and that's only because of all the episodes that I've done with Dr. Emma and Katherine that I've gotten to see her life a lot more through a different perspective. But I'm excited to talk about Katherine Parr with you. So to get started, why don't we just go back and why don't you tell the audience, why are you so fascinated with Katherine Parr?
Well, it's really difficult. I like to pinpoint the exact moment where she just has taken over my life. But I grew up, my father, he had a library and he was really into history amongst loads of other things. So I think it's sort of been ingrained with me, this sort of loving facts and loving sort of things from the past. And then I think it was kind of, Richard III, I watched that amazing documentary and he kind of, I don't know, it just caught my attention. And then I slowly went to like Anne Boleyn, and then you just sort of slowly go through. I think Anne Boleyn has a lot to answer for. I think she does really sort of bring people in. And then I don't know what it is. Well, there is a painting of Katherine Parr, and it's a copy of I think the one that was in Sotheby's, and she looks quite young and she looks like my niece. And I know it sounds really weird, like there's something about her in that image that made me be like, oh, I kind of recognize this person. And then I think reading Alison Ware's amazing book about her, it's just I literally can't tell you. I've just become incredibly fascinated in this woman. There's lots of ways that sort of she came to light. I've obviously known about them from school, but she is so fascinating. And every time I read or do more research, my admiration for her grows. I think she was such a fascinating woman. I think all of the queens are fascinating. I think lots of females in history are fascinating, but there's just something about her that's like caught my attention, and I really want to promote her to a wider audience. And she's just a really amazing woman, and I think it's high time that she gets her moment, and I think she's getting it now. So
Yeah, I love that. I love your passion for her because obviously, as we already know, I'm a huge Thomas Seymour fan. So your passion for her and my passion for him should really come out in this episode.
Well, I'm going to bring Katherine back to the top for you now.
I love it. Let's
get down.
Let's talk about your visit to Sudeley Castle and the chapel there, because I recently was just there in June for the very first time. And when I went into the chapel, it was just Nigel and I and one of the volunteers in there. And I remember the way I felt when I walked up and saw her tomb and how I was just awestruck. I was speechless. How did you feel?
It's really weird because I don't want to sound weird, but I did get quite sad. I got quite emotional being there. I think actually being at Sudeley, I think after learning so much about it, and actually you can just walk into history. You are walking the same footsteps, and then obviously going around the house, but then going into that chapel and just having that moment. And also it was just me and my husband in there. I just had this overall sense of like, first of all, I felt really sad and very emotional, and then quite excited, and the fact that you could literally touch her tomb and she was just there. Sudeley Castle is a beautiful place in itself. The museum is wonderful, seeing all her bits, but to be able to it's kind of like Westminster Abbey, to be that close to someone that I continually try to defend in some cases, and I want people, I'm trying to promote her, like just to have her sort of know that she was there, and like it's a really special place, and it's a beautiful chapel. It's so gorgeous, and the sort of history around it, and the little windows that her and Lady Jane Grey would have looked out of. just had just an very overpowering, and I got a bit emotional, and yeah, it was beautiful, but sad. I was like sad and emotional, and just an emotional person. I think it's really, I really suggest and strongly suggest that people go and visit her. I've seen all of the queens apart from Jane Seymour now, but it's so wonderful to be able to be that close to such an incredible woman. It's beautiful. It's so wonderful there.
It is. And she's the only one of Henry VIII's 6 queens who has an effigy on her tomb. She's
yes. Yeah, and actually quite a beautiful one.
Oh,
very Victorian looking. I think it was Victorian, but it was, and the angels and sort of, and then they've got the sort of, obviously when they found her, because obviously the terrible things that happened after she was dead and with her body, it's really quite really very disturbing. It's always my Halloween pose, which is quite dark, really. But the alabaster, the copy of the sort of the piece, I think, was it on the lead coffin that had her name on it, which had all the writing, which showed that it was her. They had it on the wall there. But it's a beautiful, it's gorgeous. And then her sort of all the different shields, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah. And one of the things when I went to Sudeley Castle, I really wanted to find the connection to Thomas Seymour because it was his castle. Yeah. It wasn't hers. I think sometimes people think it's hers all the time, right? Because she was the Dowager Queen, but it was actually his. And so
wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, Baron. Yeah. And so going there, I wanted to feel closer to him because really Sudeley Castle and Wolf Hall would only be the 2 locations that you could go. And even Wolf Hall, it's not there anymore. So it was just like standing on the land, which I felt nothing of him when I was there.
Yeah.
So when I went to Sudeley, I was really hoping to feel a connection to him, but I felt none. I only felt Katherine Parr. Yeah, I could feel her. Like, I know that sounds weird, but I could.
I get it.
Everywhere you went.
Do you think it would be to do with, obviously she's such an important part, but I do feel we have discussed this because Thomas Seymour, because of how people feel about him, it's almost like he's being removed from it, and she wouldn't want that. It was her husband. It doesn't matter what happened in life. It's almost like they're erasing him. Do you think that maybe?
Yes, very much. And this is kind of a discussion I've been having with the folks at Sudeley Castle too about bringing Thomas back into the story, because it's like they don't even really mention other than, oh, he owned it, or, he was the Baron of Sudeley. Well, this was his place, He did
it up for her. He made it beautiful for her pregnancy and stuff.
Yeah. So, but we're not here to talk about Thomas.
Well, he's very connected to her, so he'll probably pop up.
Yes. Well, it's inevitable. Anytime I talk about the Tudors, it's inevitable that I'm going to find a way to weave Thomas into the conversation.
What Thomas had for breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Thomas lived near there at one time. It was 10 miles away. It's near.
He lived in England.
Right, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Katherine Parr's life. Okay. So we know you're fascinated with her. We know there's so much more to her than meets the eye. And we can talk a bit about, too, some of the interpretations that we've seen of her. And I know this is probably the most popular topic right now is Katherine in film or Katherine in TV. And I loved Jolie Richardson in The Tudors. I absolutely loved her.
I haven't watched Tudors.
I don't even understand what you just said.
I've watched the bits with. I don't know. I've watched a bit of it. I don't know. I've not watched it. I'm so sorry. I need to watch. I've seen Jolie Richardson. And actually, I think she is quite a good. Do I say she looked a bit too grown up? Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of her being this very tall, elegant, beautiful blonde, I'm not sure, beautiful woman. I think she was good casting, but I haven't seen it.
Oh my goodness.
I know with what you say, I'm sure she was fantastic.
I really loved the portrayal of her in The Tudors. And for me, that was the first time that these historical figures came to life. to see them. And even when I was watching it back then, I knew how historically inaccurate much of it was, but I didn't care because I was like, oh, here's Henry VIII and look how hot Jonathan Rhys Meyers is. He
really aged terribly, didn't he?
He did. But it was really nice to see her in that role. And I do agree, she did look a little mature for Katherine Parr, but
beautiful.
Yes. And she just has like the perfect demeanor for Katherine Parr to me. And I loved her interactions with Thomas Seymour in the show. I thought it was just perfect. And then, of course, oh, I'm sorry, I just cut you off.
I'm going to have to watch it.
Yes, you do. And then, of course, I'm going to jump forward to Becoming Elizabeth, which I have my own opinions on Becoming Elizabeth. But what did you think of Katherine Parr in that?
I feel terrible because I'm not a critic and I should never critique someone's work, but I did not like, unfortunately, I did not like Jessica Rayner's portrayal of her. I think Elizabeth, Katherine loved Elizabeth, and you did not get that from her. She was, I guess, she was way too manipulative, and and it was just sort of very scheming. I thought it just was. You didn't believe how much, because I truly believe that Katherine had such huge influence on Elizabeth, she played Jane Rochford,
yes,
in Wolf Hall, was it?
Yeah.
And she played the same character, and I just think I mean, maybe it was more, I guess maybe how Becoming Elizabeth was written, it's like, it was very dark, and I just, it was like, it just wasn't right. And I feel like people, unfortunately, what's come from that is people have taken that Jessica Rayner's what do you call it? God, I've got the words. Jessica Rayner's performance as Katherine, as that was Katherine Parr. This is the other thing that, as a person trying to promote someone's story, I'm constantly like battling. They've taken it to heart, and that's what really upsets me. It's like, apart from obviously a couple of other times, this is the first time that I think Katherine was put onto the mainstream and really promoted this TV show. But it's people send me these messages. I'm like, Becoming Elizabeth is not real. It's not true. It's from history, but the people are real. But this is not right. Like, please, you have to stop saying this stuff. Yes. They were like, she was manipulative. She was this. I was like, I mean, go get a book first of all and read it. But no, I just was really disappointed. I can't. I sometimes rewatch it because I love Tom Cullen as Thomas Seymour. I think he's fantastic.
Yes.
Just really great acting.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I think he was so well cast. I thought Elizabeth, I think they were all well cast, but she just was it just wasn't right. I was like, come on, give her a cuddle or something. It was not, obviously I wasn't there, but I don't believe it was like that at all.
Yeah, well, we know, obviously, I didn't agree with the writing on Thomas Seymour, and I'd interviewed the writer at the time before it came out, and she let me know, you're not going to like my take on Thomas Seymour. And I expected it because everybody pictures him as the villain and this pervert and whatever. So when I watched it, I wasn't too surprised at the portrayal of him. I did not like what they did with Katherine either. I thought it was just a way to tell the story.
They were pantomime villains, I think.
Yeah.
The only thing with Thomas Seymour, I agree. The only thing is, I think he was so well cast, because I think that if, say, Elizabeth did fancy him and thought, he was obviously gorgeous, Thomas Seymour. We know this. He was, he could write poetry, he could sing. He was like the perfect courtier. I think he was very well cast as that. He's such a handsome man, Tom Cullen. It was like, of course, you would just, if he gave you a bit of attention, you'd be like, oh. But I thought that sort of the casting was really good to unlike in Firebrand, he's not quite on the same level as Tom Cullen.
Yeah.
But
Now let's talk about Firebrand. And we'll have to say there's going to be a lot of spoiler alerts here because maybe you haven't seen it. I am in the US, so I luckily was able to see it when I got back from England in July because it came out here just as I arrived in England. So I got to see it months ago. I know it only recently came out in England. And when I watched it, I had read the book. I had read The Queen's Gambit by Liz Fremantle and I loved it. I absolutely loved the book. The film, I went, what the heck happened? This is not the same as the book.
I loved it. I read the book as well. The book was very different to the film in a sense, but I have had lots of discussions about this. I think so. At the very beginning of the film, there was this blurb, and it basically said that history is written, but we can make our own wild conclusions. And I seem to be the only person that's seen this. So people are saying, oh, if you did, I mean, no one knew what was going to happen in the end. I didn't expect that, but this was based on a book, but it was based on with historical events, but they were going to make it they were doing their wildest thoughts were going to come out of it. So obviously the ending is completely wild, but I think that was the only ending that film could have had. What else was she going to do? He was so horrible to her. I was willing. I was like, do it. Do it.
You're eating your popcorn, just going, yeah.
Throwing stuff, throwing tomatoes. But like I thought Alicia Vikander was perfectly cast. I was really lucky. I went to a screening of it and she came and did a Q&A. Because when originally they said they cast her, I think she's an incredible actress, but I was very like, I'm very precious. I love Katherine Parr. I think she's wonderful. And I want this to be, if it's a movie and I'm going to tell all my friends to go and see it, to be like, this is why I like this woman. My sole focus is like, I really hope that she does a good job, because at this time, Katherine, it was all very internal. It was, it was a very, very scary time. And when she spoke, she had done so much research. She was quoting Lamentations of the Sinner. She was quoting her books. She was, she had done such great research, and you could see it. And they had Dr. Elizabeth Norton was the historian on with them. And you knew it was so beautifully done. And with her and Jude Law, he was phenomenal. And like, obviously Henry is such a big character. He's such a great character for an actor to play, but he always sort of overtakes. It was like, right, we need to make sure that because she's internally and all her worries are internal, and she's got to try and navigate this horrible situation sort of with a smile. How can she do that without sort of this bombastic character of Henry VIII? But they were so well cast together. I thought it was, I mean, it made me cry at scenes. It's really dark. But I think how the film, the thing is, we don't actually know what went on behind closed doors. He was, at that time, Henry VIII was very ill. He was self-medicating with alcohol. He could have been that aggressive and abusive. Like people were terrified of him. Okay, there's some really dark scenes of abuse, but like, I thought we saw them. I was like transported. And not only that, the costumes were incredible. The scene with the dinner table where I was taken from Finchley, where I watched it, and put in this Tudor time. I thought it was so well done. And I think, yes, there was all these wild, like, sort of start changing, but there's no other way. Then you've got to realize that this is not true. Spoiler, she didn't kill him. I'm like, okay, so like, unless they did exactly what happened, which they could have done, they don't have to change her story. That would be, the ending would be different. But the fact is that with what they were doing was their story, their conclusion, and the sort of the build up to it. Like, and the fact that at the end, no one really cared. They all were just, no one questioned it apparently. And I thought I'm like, I'm going in a like quite creatively and just being like, it was beautiful. I thought it was a great story, but it's also really important that people know that this isn't what happened. And it's giving me a chance to open, hopefully people might come and find me online, little old me, and be like, oh wow, let's learn more about her. It's opening the conversation about Katheryn, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I think I just really, and I'm not just saying that because I'm so like, oh my god, it's about Katherine Parr. Like genuinely, I was concerned and worried, and actually I came out and like I was like, I thought it was just great. I'm gonna take myself out. I understand I can like be a stickler for historical accuracy, but this was a movie and I just thought it was so good. I really liked it. But I've watched it twice now as well. So the second time I was just as, I think they actually changed it slightly when I watched it the second time. For some reason, when I watched it originally, there was a lot of very dark scenes. And I don't know if where I watched it in a really old cinema in Sudeley called Phoenix Cinema. It's a beautiful like Art Deco cinema. And it's the clientele are slightly older. I don't know if they took some stuff out because it wasn't quite as dark as I remember. It was dark, but I loved it and I thought she was fantastic.
Okay, so I know I mentioned that, I was kind of disappointed in the film because I loved the book so much. And to me, the book was really telling like this love story of Thomas and Katheryn. And it wasn't just her story, because for me, it was like, oh, we finally get to see Thomas and Katheryn together. And I was hoping to see some of the steamy love scenes on film, like the one in the garden, right? To me, when I was reading the book, I thought, oh, this is just... fanning myself going, this is exactly how I imagine them.
Wow.
But then we didn't get any of that in the film. We barely got any Thomas Seymour. And what we did of Thomas Seymour, he was like this bad guy who turned Katheryn into the authorities.
I mean, I agree. I thought I did quite like their interaction actually, because I think he actually at first I think he came across he was quite a nice character, and I think he could, he was sort of like being like, don't do this, Katheryn, don't do this, and like that amazing scene when they're dancing outside. I quite liked him. He's in comparison to like Tom Cullen, like he was nice in it. Who was the actor? Ridley, Sam Riley.
Yeah, maybe Sam Riley.
Sam Riley. And then I think the point that I try and say about Firebrand is this is a film about Katheryn, and everyone, obviously Henry is a big part, but everyone is just a bit part. Like it's about her. So him kind of just coming in, and also this is only in 1544, 5.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
It's only one tiny part of her life. Obviously, a terribly scary time, but there's only a small part of her time, and it's like I think it would take away. It's just honing in one part, and what I'm trying to it's like it would take away, and like even having like Elizabeth was just a small part, like everything was just a small bit, but it was just focusing mainly on her. And I think as soon as Thomas would come in, it's sort of deflecting from what the story was, but also like I think it kind of made her a bit more like I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't really know how to explain. But I think it was him. I like that he was there, but he always overtakes her. Thomas Seymour seems to, and forgive me, like he seems to. If you talk about Katherine Parr, he always pops up, and I think it's like it's time where it's just about we just talk about Katherine Parr. But I quite liked him in it, and then obviously the really mad thing with the necklace. But without him doing that, there would have been no plot to this film. Like,
yeah,
you really hated it, didn't you?
I honestly, when that scene when he like turned her in, my jaw dropped, and I was like, "What the?"
Well, it was Edward Seymour that really see, and I like and also the age difference between those two. What was going on, like? But I think that it was sort of trying to, obviously you know a lot more about Thomas Seymour than I do, but I think this whole thing of him being quite an ambitious person, like you said earlier, rightfully everyone was ambitious, men were ambitious. It kind of was like that sort of I think it was sort of trying to set up for like him doing something that was so insanely bad, and like at that moment, like you do one thing and you ruin someone else's life. And I think that sort of ambition, or like, because he was kind of blackmailed a bit by, well, Edward was a bit blackmailed, but it's like it's the Tudor court, like everyone is after everything, and there's so much. I would have lasted for one, I would have been out of that court, my head would have been on a pike within a second. I would have laughed at something bad and they would be like, get out. Like, God, I would have been the court jester probably and got my head chopped off. But like, I think it sort of gave that sort of idea. It's like one moment of like, you just do one thing, it's gonna, that sort of domino effect. And I thought it was perfect for the film. But it's not real. The film is not real.
It does make me wonder the way the film ended, and spoiler alert, I guess you already said, kind of, but she smothers him with a pillow at the end.
Oh no, it's just the arm, isn't it?
Oh, was it? I thought she put a pillow over him too. I've only seen it once, so.
She puts her, I mean, actually, Lucy Vikander is a lot taller than I thought she walked past me, but he and Henry, Jude Law's Henry, that's like big, one arm, and I'm like, but then he was a really old man. Yeah, go on, girl, go on. So that writing, she's got big muscles.
Her right arm.
Well, right arm.
It makes me wonder, like, if they were to have, the next year after that happened, how they would have told her story now that they've ruined everything between her and Thomas Seymour. What would have happened with Katherine Parr? Would she have become regent to Edward VI then, do you think?
Well, yes, she wasn't it? Because they never changed that. He didn't change the will, didn't he? That was the whole thing.
Yeah, it was an interesting.
Like, oh, well, I wish she could have been regent. Like, ugh. But then, history is history. That's what happened. But like, yeah, in that film, there's a whole different one. Mary I, who I love, wouldn't have been the first queen of England. Like the whole thing with Lady, it would just, it's actually really great. That's kind of a dystopian. Ooh, we should write this. What happened? But would she have been with Thomas?
Right. You would think if she had found out he turned her in and got her sent to the Tower, probably not.
Maybe he would have but
no. Love, I had to do something. It was me or you. I chose me.
Oh God, Katherine. She probably, I mean, to be fair, at the end when she's sort of walking and looking at her arms, because maybe she just walked off into the distance and just went and lived a life in the countryside, like we hope Mary Boleyn did as well.
Right, exactly. I found it interesting because you talked about how the story was really all about Katherine Parr, and this was the first time that we kind of got to see her story, and it was very focused on religion.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really the focus of the film, was her and Anne Askew and how she would sneak off and go watch Anne. And this is the part of Katherine's life that I really haven't focused on. It's never been of interest to me. Of course, I've just looked at her after Henry VIII dies in 1547 and her relationship with Thomas. Really, I should know more about her. All of the writing that she did. I'm just curious, when it comes to religion and comes to, let's even say Firebrand, if we can associate it with Firebrand, what is your take on Katherine and her religious views and how the film portrayed it too?
I think so. One thing we have to remember, which sometimes I find really hard to get my head around, like religion was so important in that time. Like, I mean, like it was real, like, it was a real thing. And I'm like, oh, well, because one of the things that Katherine, when in real life, real Katherine, she said that when Henry wanted to marry her, she was really at first didn't really want to, but then she just was like, well, God is willing me, God is making me to do this. This is what I have to do. And some people are like, yeah, well, you're going to be queen. Like your modern mind would be like, oh yeah, God told you, did he? But it was real. She truly believed this. And I think what was great about this film was sort of, I think highlighting this time, which really did happen to her, and how actually Katherine played a really significant role in the English Reformation, and she really did promote this Protestant ideas at court. Like, she really did do that. And I think this sort of that time, obviously when then Edward came, who was quite a scary young man. He was a staunch Protestant. I think that the film made us understand like how it's kind of like we can put it to modern times. People get ridiculed all the time for their religion and things like that, but it was like, at that time it was like the country was in such turmoil, and I think you really got to sort of see that, like, I think that film showed, like, with Anne Askew, I thought she was fabulous. Also, we don't know if Elizabeth Norton said that she didn't think that. No, Elizabeth Norton said she thinks that Katherine could have met Anne. Like, there's no reason for her not to, but there is no, in that film when she's going to meet her like that, like, we don't know if that probably didn't happen. But I think the fact that this woman that was, how invested she was in promoting this new idea, and like, it was just really well done. And I think the fact that how far people would take their beliefs to the point where they could be executed, I think that was really well done. But I think the sort of idea of sort of this one woman in court, I mean, there was lots of people in court, but this of a queen, essentially heresy. It was heresy what she was doing. She really was trying to very well, not necessarily when she's going to the king to talk about it, but like she really was part of this the Reformation, and she was like one of the most highest profile people. And I think you got to see that. I think you got to see how it was slowly coming through court. And but I think, yeah, and I thought Gardner was so good in it as well. Like, this old man looks like Father Christmas, like really sweet, but he will literally take you down. He is at that stake. I thought it was and and also the fact that we got to see her writing, her works that she wrote. One of the first women in England to have work, the Queen will have her work published over her name, and like it's the first reform works in the English language. Like, and we got to see that, and I think that's something that people don't know. And I think they covered all the bases, I think, with her. And even like the being a stepmother, like they did a good job.
Yeah. She was so intelligent, and I get the impression from my research on Thomas, seeing how I find a way to bring him back in again, that I think he might have been intimidated by her intelligence a little bit.
I think they all were. I think what was great in that film, and which I think that Tudor court, the how they portrayed the Tudor court, I think was probably one of the closest we'll get to actually seeing it. But the fact that the men were like, wow, like always, it was just all like really blokey, and the women were just, they had a real closeness. And I think that I think that I mean, I can't speak for Thomas Seymour because I don't know enough about him, but yeah, I think so. I think they were all scared of her. And I think the fact that she had such a big influence over Elizabeth and Edward, I mean, obviously Mary was like her friend, they were the same age, so it's much more. Mary is very different, but to influence someone and to show she was a very influential, very smart woman, and she didn't do it in like it wasn't a horrible way. It was like, look what you can do as a woman. And like her mother has a lot to answer for. Like, her education she was really amazingly educated. She learned languages, and like, the people, there's people that went to court, like foreign diplomats, and they all just said how she was the queen. She was amazing. And I think it's true. Yeah, I think she was a very smart woman. And I think she also, what from my research as well, what they say is like watching, she kind of, her mum, so her dad died when she was young, and her mum took over everything, and her mum never remarried. Which is very unusual, but her mum took a real interest in making like all of her brother and her sister, all of them had a great education. And it wasn't just sewing and stuff, it was, learning Latin, it was learning languages, it was learning mathematics, it was like learning everything. And I think the only thing about her having such a strong female influence of her mum, obviously it's amazing, but at that time, women, we're not there. We have to remember how we live now is very, very different to how they lived. And yes, being a strong woman is fantastic, and we want that, but like, it was not normal. And I think that it's really important that, like, you know, yes, she was quite a strong-willed woman. I believe that but I also believe that that has a negative effects of her maybe saying things that are out of line, behaving sometimes, you know, the fact that she sort of so when she's later on in her life, she's talking to Henry about religion, she's so passionate. It's like, actually there's a bad thing of being sort of having that sort of freedom of speech, essentially. And I think she sort of reeled it in, but she also was diplomatic and she was smart. But I think she definitely scared a lot of men, and I think she paved the way for a lot of women. I think she was a huge influence on Elizabeth. They were very smart. They were bright. All these women were so smart, and they were like, you know, these people that weren't so smart, sort of bashing them down. But yeah, I think I do. Perhaps maybe that's why Thomas was maybe later in her life not so nice to her. I don't want to say too much, but perhaps he was like, maybe it was too much to have such a we don't have to put that.
We're not going there. No.
I really know. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. I'm like, I don't want to. I'm on the fence. I'm just sitting here.
You know what? One of these days I'm going to finish this book, and then I can go around and tell people all of my research. Like, once it's published, then I can talk about it, and I cannot wait for that. But
you get in there, girl. You do that.
It's coming. It's coming. I do want to talk briefly about her relationship with Catherine Willoughby too, because it really seems like they were really good friends. Would you call them best friends?
Well, they were best friends. I actually did a post about Catherine Willoughby the other day, and I'm trying to focus on Catherine's ladies in waiting, but she was, I mean, Catherine Willoughby was a pretty outstanding woman herself, but yeah, they definitely had a very, very strong bond. I think with religion, they had the same religious ideas. I think there was, I think at this time we were talking about in regards to like Firebrand and stuff, when sort of she was going to get arrested, Elizabeth, Katheryn. I think that solidified their relationship. I think they were really quite scared, but I think that Katheryn I don't know if she got questioned. I know that they definitely tried to put Catherine Willoughby definitely was being pinned, like they were pinning Anne Askew on her. But I don't believe that Katherine Parr would have ever allowed anything to happen to her. But they were fabulous. And obviously when sadly she died, Katherine Parr died, she was given Mary was in, well, Thomas was obviously, I don't really know why he gave her the child, but I think it must have been, you know, there was friction with the family, and you know, he obviously went a bit crazy, and obviously Mary needed to be in a safe house. And I know that Edward Seymour had her first, but Katherine had this child, and really sadly there's letters and things where, you know, this is a royal child, this baby Mary needs to be looked after, and it's a lot of money, like, and really sad, these letters of Catherine Willoughby desperately just being to Edward Seymour being like, I need financial aid, like I can't bring up to her. And I think it's really, really sad. But she's a fascinating woman, Catherine Willoughby. I think this is the thing about Katherine Parr. She had such cool women around her. I've been sort of doing like a bit more research into them all. But they were amazing. But yeah, they definitely were very, very close. And I think to sort of navigate that time, I mean, you had to, you know, you got to keep these people close to you. And I truly believe that when they were trying to pin the Anne Askew stuff on Catherine Willoughby was one of them, and another one of her ladies in waiting, there's no way that Catherine Parr would have ever let anything that the fact that they sort of protected Catherine, but it would have been vice versa.
Yeah.
But they're really cool women. They're really cool women. We'd like to have these girls as friends.
No doubt. I would definitely like to have those women as friends too. Gosh, Bonnie, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface on this topic. So I think I'm going to have you back again.
Yes. I will talk all day long.
And maybe the next time I have you on, we can talk a little bit more about Thomas Seymour.
Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to. I'd love to talk to you about it. I think it's been really nice speaking to you anyway, but you have I'm just really interested to talk about him and to talk about Katheryn, to have a different view and opinion on that time. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, until we meet again, everybody, this is Bonnie Beadle. She is with the Katherine Parr Society. You can find her on Instagram. Are you anywhere else, Bonnie?
I'm just on Instagram. I'm slowly branching out, but for now, one thing at a time.
All right. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, please consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. As a patron, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, some patron exclusive content, and even discounts on upcoming webinars and lectures. Head on over to Patreon today to find out more information. And for as little as $3 a month, you can show your support. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.